And here we are. Welcome. Glad to see everybody. It's Thursday, the 4th of December. Let's see if I can get this under control here. A little better. So I hope everybody's been well, and we're back. And we're going to jump in. Shirt fit for a matador. Absolutely. I love these things. I mentioned them several times before. You know, when I first saw them, I thought they were, kind of authentic, like 1950s cotton shirts with, stripes sewn on them. They're real thin fabric, synthetic fabric, and it's a print, but they look really cool. I love them. So, let me just I gotta go turn off the monetization, which is my weekly ritual for the YouTube show here. Hang on a second. Okay, here we go. So many distractions, so little time. Sorry about that. I just don't know why I have to keep doing this, but I do. This thing was supposed to drop. Here it is. And then we'll just go back here. There it is. Okay, great. Now we're all teed up and ready to go. We are doing well. Thanks for asking. Real good ideas. How's Bill and Natasha doing? We're both doing just great. And how's everybody else? I had a good friend of mine, somebody who I like and admire very, very much. Why is it frozen like that? Hang on a second. I'm trying to just get the page saying it's a page unresponsive for YouTube. Not my page. Not my page. I do it. Okay. I'll exit that page then. To hell with you. We'll do it this way. A person that I know and I think very, very highly of. 2-3 days ago, he's a gentleman's a little bit older than me, somewhat older than me. And his son just plain died of a heart attack just at 55. And it's the worst thing that can happen to somebody, and really the worst thing that can happen to somebody. And it's just so heartbreaking and kind of scary, This these widowmakers or whatever they call them just come out of thin air, and just really, really hard. Come on. I don't know why it's not letting me join the chat here. All right. I don't really need it. I guess I can just read this one. You guys on YouTube are okay? Yeah. Yeah. Just really, really hard news, and I'm not going to worry about trying to catch this thing up again. It is what it is. For some reason, the YouTube page is freezing for me, but the YouTube stream from the whatchamacallit looks good. I didn't ask about whether it was vaxxed or not, and I'm certainly not going to. I'm just very glad that I wasn't, Yeah, I can see you guys are. Some reason why it's just not wanting to run the live page, but that's okay. I can see everybody, so that's good. So that was really, really sad, and you know, this is one of the most, ancient questions, and Gordon's looking dark, and so was Captain James T. Kirk, the Starship Enterprise. They're both looking a little underexposed there. Why these things happen to good people, and of course, this is obviously one of the great mysteries of life. But there you go. Marusha says apparently Candace and TPUSA are finally going to have a live Q&A session together and hash things out. Hopefully it brings more unity and finality. I don't see that happening. Got him, Coach, a friend of mine, a little older than I am, really one of the most wonderful men I know in the world. Just really wonderful, wonderful, good, patriotic man. Had his 55-year-old son just died of a heart attack out of nowhere, just dropped, and it's just really terrible. Oh, what about that red robot? Says she already checked. She already backed out. Of course she did. Of course she did. Yeah, I was going to say there's no way that Candace would. I didn't know that she'd back out so early, but there's no way she's going to put this grift aside. I mean, this is making her a fortune. The only thing that Candace would take as a palliative for this would be if they offer her TPUSA on a plate. But she already backed out, did she? Okay, what a chicken shit little bitch. She really is just the lowest form of delusional grifter. She's just, it's just really, really appalling. Road Rider said my brother went at 59, same thing, heart attack. Yeah, and was it Quality 1701, like those numbers, says there's no redemption arc for me for Candace. She's dead to me. Yeah, me too. Don Vickery says, well, we live in a fallen world. Will we do that as well? Yeah, I remember this. Ace Affinity said her one condition was that they don't assassinate her, so I wonder what the terms were that made her back out. Marisha says, I see no signs of malice or deception in her eyes or body language. I genuinely think she's a true believer, even if she's wrong. I think you really need to get your prescriptions examined, Marusha. She's just absolutely so clearly to me, so unspeakably clearly to me, just plain bitter, jealous, ambitious liar. And you can't convince me that she could genuinely believe whatever 11 different conspiracy theories that she's floated the entire time. She's just plain evil. She's just awful. Yeah. Yeah, this is why I wanted to get that page going. It's a little hard for me. I can make this a little larger. Hang on a second. Thank you to Marisha Dark for. Wait a minute. Is that going to work on this? Let's find out. No, it's apparently just for. Yeah, it's just a web page. Says she's either evil or batshit crazy. She can't be both, But anyway, I just don't get it. I'd be very surprised at what people want to truly believe. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. I just don't believe she believes it. I think she is. I just think she's just horrible. Fame Name says, I haven't listened to her much the last quarter decade or so, but I like Candace. I would almost consider myself a fan. I think if you had watched her in the last couple of months, you'd become less of a fan. Got him, Coach says, Bill, will you watch the Piers Morgan Uncensored show on Monday with Nick Fuentes? No. Nick Fuentes was on Steve Crowder Live this morning, and he's not an anti-Semite, and he doesn't hate Jews. He said he's not an anti-Semite, and he doesn't hate Jews. Well, Nick Fuentes will say whatever he has to say to get attention. So, I don't think Nick Fuentes has any principles. He talks about how he wants that order is more important than freedom. I'm really already quite bored with Nick Fuentes. I really am. So I will. I'll undoubtedly see some clips from it, but no, there's no there. He doesn't interest me. Although he's not able to hold my interest. Let's put it that way. Since we were short on questions last time, I really would like to get to all of them this time. Yeah, and I'm not too worried about the Groyper army either, honestly. Again, people like this can be spoilers, and they can throw rocks and they can gum up the works and do things like that. But in terms of organized political movement, it seems like I just don't think so. That's a great question. Real Good Ideas says, Bill, as the internationally renowned expert and Cold War survivor, more like thriver that you are, have you seen the 1964 film Failsafe? I have. Failsafe is a great movie. Fame Name says Jesus is the answer, Bill. I think you're probably right about that. Fame Name. I don't know what Jesus has to do with Nick Fuentes, to be honest with you. Failsafe is a terrific film. It's really, really good. It's one of those movies that is just beautifully written because it's essentially two people in a room on a telephone. It's Henry Fonda and oh, come on. Why can't I get his face? It was Major Nelson, Larry Hagman, thanks. Yeah. And J.R. Ewing. Larry Hagman is the translator. And it was just the two of them in a room, just two really great actors. And they are just putting all of the drama onto the phone. It's a really, really well-written movie. It's one of those kind of Cold War films that didn't get enough attention. Dr. Strangelove has got a lot more attention. Dr. Strangelove, the dark comedy. Failsafe is essentially the same movie. It's not funny. Another great movie, very similar to Failsafe, which I saw the end of about a week or two ago, is it's called The Bedford Incident. The Bedford Incident is a terrific Cold War drama, really good. Really, really good movie, and again, not very well known, but terrific. Richard Widmark, Sidney Poitier, Wally Cox is in that movie, and so I'm just spacing on names tonight. And so is James MacArthur. So there you go. Caslin says I didn't find Doctor Strange particularly funny either, but then I'm not really a Kubrick fan. I think that everybody talks about Peter Sellers and Peter Sellers is very good in Doctor Strangelove, but I think the comedy genius in Doctor Strangelove is George C. Scott of all people. I think he's just insanely good in that movie. I think he's a terrific actor. I just loved him and thought he was great in everything he did. Roadrunner wants to know, does anybody know what that silver thing is on Captain Kirk's belt? Yes, this way. It is a translator device. Right there. translator device that was given to them by the people that set up the big fight with the Gorns. So that was allowing them to talk to each other. It's probably a... No, I don't know what that looks like. It looks like a universal translator to me. So anyway, let's just go ahead and get into the questions. Why don't we? Because I don't really have a big warm up for this one tonight. Okay, look at that. Stratosphere launch questions for 251204, curated by Roadrunner. Roadrunner, thank you very much for that. It's nice of you guys. I really, really appreciate you guys going to this trouble all this time. Post your politics-related questions here. Please use the larger fonts so Bill doesn't have to squint into the bright lights. Giardia is not welcome. Well, I've decided to just kind of stick with the glasses, and it seems to be helping. Yeah, Giardia, that was less than fun. All right, let's see what we got here. We just do a quick review. We got a Roadrunner, got a Marusha Dark, got a Braden Higby, Road Rider, Bob Neef, Jacob Belchik, another Jacob Belchik, Eric Blake. Yeah, let's do those and call it a night. Okay. Roadrunner. Greetings, friend Bill. Hey, Roadrunner, how are you? As an unrepentant conservative capitalist, I was disheartened to see a recent Rasmussen and Heartland Institute poll shows that 51% of young voters 18 to 39 years old believe that democratic socialism is the answer to their current economic problems. And these are not the usual suspects with the studies degrees. These are young men and women who have business, accounting, and other previously worthwhile degrees who cannot find decent jobs because business and industry are jumping on the AI bandwagon to save money. Not being able to find work and all of the indoctrination they're receiving from colleges and on the internet, as well as the total lack of education and history showing what socialism of any kind actually does to their believers, many young people are asking why not give it a try. They don't realize that they won't be able to just say that it didn't work and go back to capitalism. We know our education system has failed them. Has our capitalist system also failed them? Well, the thing I think that so few people realize is just, and they don't realize it because life is so cushy. I mean, you know, we live in the most comfortable time in human history in terms of just, you know, day-to-day human existence. We got a lot of stress, and I'm not saying that everybody's, you know, just rolling in clover and sipping margaritas on the beach, but in terms of physical comforts and things like this nothing comes even close to this time. And because of that, we don't recognize the fact that we are living in the middle of one of the most wrenching and jarring transformational periods in human history. There's only been two others like this. The transition from hunter-gatherers to farmers and agriculture, and the transition, the beginning of the rise of cities, 7,000 years ago. 300 years ago, the beginning of the industrial age, and people leaving farms and moving to cities to work in factories, and starting realistically right around the late 90s with the invention of the internet, the transformation into an industrial economy. And these are enormous changes, far, far bigger changes than any kind of wars or diseases or empires or anything like these. These are thrice in the history of the species changes. And so there's going to be a great deal of upheaval and a great deal of realignment, and fingers are going to get pinched when these things are moving, and there's no question about that. And I'm not trying to minimize it. On the contrary, it's catastrophic changes in the social environment, added to which are elements of this. So, for example, when you had the Industrial Revolution, you got the extra benefit of pollution. When you have the Information Revolution, you have the extra benefit of social media pollution, and it makes it harder rather than easier. Life would have been easier making the transition to factories if everybody wasn't breathing this black smoke. And nevertheless, that's where you are. You get these systems that arrive out of this new wave. It's not even a new technology; it's a whole new wave of doing things. And all of these kind of toxic things start to spin off, and it takes a long time to get them under control. It takes a long time to get industrial pollution under control. It takes a long time to get information pollution under control. Centuries centuries. And so there's certainly plenty of cause for it. I don't remember if it was Steve or Scott's Right Angle, which was shot on Tuesday, but Elon Musk was talking about the likelihood that that we will soon enter a point with AI and with humanoid robots where work will become optional. And I actually believe he's right. I've seen some projections of what AI productivity will do to just general economic growth. So let's just for a second say that we just kind of manage to bully our way through the next couple years, and we get to a point where something that we would probably refer to as socialism, but really is unseen before, and that would be an economy that's producing so much, generating so much wealth that it can afford to have people that just don't work. There's a lot of moving parts here, so this is essentially a science fiction question, but basically if you break it down, you would think, okay, the problem would be that if you have all these people that aren't working, then you're going to have a bigger social burden on social services. But what you find out is that the more leisure you give to people, the less procreation they're doing. And so the idea that you're going to have this like exponentially growing number of out of work people seems to me that if you actually gave people this so-called basic living wage, you just basically paid people to eat and just take it all the way. Just say that there's enough money so that everybody gets their own apartment and everybody gets their own income, and you don't have to work. If you want to work, you can, but you don't have to. You get enough money to to order your Starbucks and have a TV set and essentially live the life that you're leading now. I said that thank you, Fame Name. My response to this was, I think first of all that we need to make a distinction between work and drudgery. I'm all about eliminating drudgery. Work produces value. Work generates wealth, not just money for the people. You create things that weren't there before. You're making society wealthier, and the wealthier the society is, the better care they take of the environment, and the better health they have, longer life, higher quality of life, all this stuff. So work is good, obviously, and important, obviously. And I don't think you can eliminate work or want to. Roger Ramjet says universal basic health care would be a horrible mistake. I think so too, for a reason I'll elaborate in a minute. But anything that eliminates drudgery, that would be great. When I started working here, when I got to LA, I got a job as an office temp, and they put me in Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which was awesome. So I spent my first weeks and months in Los Angeles driving around Beverly Hills, picking up people for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, driving them back to the office or driving them back to their homes. So that was great. And then finally that job came to an end. And then the next job I had at the temp agency, they took me into, I still pass the building sometimes. I know exactly where it is on Santa Monica Boulevard in Santa Monica. They took me to this insurance company, and they took me up to like the 8th floor or something, and they took me past all the cubicles of all the people working, and honestly, it just went back in the back, past the air conditioning, past the storage, all this, and way, way, way in the back, away from everybody else, was this little corner. It wasn't even a cubicle. It was a desk between cinder block walls that had been painted, and there was a shelf up here. These two huge blue plastic binders, huge, this thick, and she pulled them down. And the person who's training me up, and she opens them both up, and they're both that old green and white, computer printout paper. And this woman said, "So, Bill, here's your job. You go to this folder, and you go to the name that you see on the bottom here, or the top of the list rather, and then when you see that name, you need to go to the other folder, which is alphabetized. This first folder is a list of people who have made claims, have unresolved claims against the company, and the second folder is the response to them. And so your job is to compare these two lists and make sure that everybody who's filed a complaint or some kind of claim has had an appropriate reaction and so on." And I took a look at this, and I was in really tight financial straits, and I've been working since I was 13, so this wasn't one of those I've got time blindness kind of things, it wasn't one of those things. I just said, whatever her name was, Miss whatever, I can't do this job. I'm terribly sorry, but I can't do it. And she said, "What about it? Don't you understand?" And I said, "No, I understand it completely. I just can't do it." And I just apologized profusely. That was the end of me at that temp agency. Went out and got a job as a limo driver. It's not like I didn't want to work. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And so I found some other work, a couple days later, and it turned into a 3-year stint, which had its ups and downs. But to me, that kind of thing was just the definition of drudgery. And I'd be happy to see that kind of drudgery disappear. I'm glad I don't have to, not only do I not have to take my laundry down to the laundromat, I'm glad I don't have to take it down to the river and beat the clothes with rocks, and I'm glad I don't have to carry water and all of these other things. So drudgery doesn't produce anything. It just steals your time and your life, and it steals your will to live. But work is something else. And if you, as a thought experiment, say that you increase productivity by a couple orders of magnitude, where the society is generating enough money and products continue to fall in price, so that you could really say to everybody, "Here, we'll cover your rent, and we'll cover your, here's your food budget," which is not, it's not a rice and beans budget, and you don't have to work. This is where things get interesting. One of the things that is a really telling thing about how humans behave is the fact that right now anybody can get a degree in anything for free. I think that's really a fair statement. Anybody can get a degree in anything for free right now on the internet. And when the internet was first introduced, it was sold as access to the world's information storehouse and the ability to to perform e-commerce. We're doing e-commerce right now, obviously, and so it's opened a lot of doors. But unfortunately, what we find is that people don't use their free time to further their education and get degrees. They do what I do, which is use their free time to watch the WKRP and Cincinnati marathons and play video games and watch porn and sleep all day. And once you get into that cycle, and I've been in that cycle, it's hard. It's really hard to get out of. And I think, if I had to guess, that if you were to have a universal basic income, if I had to guess at the number, I would say 95% of people would essentially do nothing. I only think there's 5 or 10% of the population that has the internal discipline to use something like that as a ladder, as a means of bettering themselves. 5 to 10% of the population would use that time to study hard, get degrees, or produce, art or whatever. And and the rest of the society would just plain do nothing. And the problem with doing nothing is you get bored, and when you get bored, you get entitled and you get violent. One of the reasons that the left is so, the limousine left, hates America so much is because it's provided so much prosperity that there's nothing that they lack, and so on. It was somebody a long time ago. I should have remembered their name, but back when The Walking Dead was huge and zombie movies were everywhere, there was a discussion online about what was the appeal of these zombie movies and all of these post-apocalyptic things, and Afterman, and what happens if humans left, we're all died off tomorrow, and all of these things, And somebody said, in a society without adventure, the only adventure left is to destroy the society. And I thought, damn, man, yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. The only adventure left is to destroy the society. And that's what I think would happen. Related to this, I've been doing so much fun stuff on colonies. I did a great amount of work last couple days on the essence of quantum theory and quantum probabilities and so on and so forth. And I'll talk about that on Monday. But I was having a discussion with ChatGPT about the Great Filter. The Great Filter is a concept that basically says we believe the conditions for life to be quite common, really quite common. When I was a young person, 13, 14 years old, there was no evidence of planets around other stars. We were not able to detect them. There was a great deal of excitement that Barnard's star, which is the second closest star to the sun, was showing a wobble that might be indicative of 2 exoplanets, but we didn't know if there were any exoplanets. We thought that the solar system as it exists now was the template for solar systems. All of the rocky planets in close to the sun, that makes sense. The solar wind blows away the atmospheres of those planets closest to the sun, and then as you get further out into the solar system, you get the gas giants, and seemed pretty straightforward. And once we started developing the technology to start really understanding about these exoplanets, I don't know how many there are as of today. It's certainly more than 10,000. We're finding things like Jupiters that are in a 4-day orbit around their sun, and their surface temperature is 3,000 degrees. It just doesn't make any sense to us. The reason I bring this up is that the conditions for life seem to be a lot more common than we thought they were. And certainly the number and the prevalence of planets far greater than we were daring to hope in the 1970s. So the question is, where are all the technological societies? We have very sensitive listening equipment now, and unlike those early days of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, where we would point a radio telescope at a star, and then we just slowly tune the frequency and listen in on every. Now we can just aim it there, just pick up buckets of information, all the frequencies. We just vacuuming up information now, and we're not getting anything. So Lord Bio says, "I'll bet we're first in the universe." I think we are too, but there's a point to all of this, and related to the question. And the point is this: people who look at this Fermi paradox, it's called, have hypothesized something called the Great Filter, and the idea is that there's something that is preventing large numbers of technological societies from being out there. Something is filtering them out, and the question is, as far as humanity is concerned, is the Great Filter behind us, or is the Great Filter in front of us? If the Great Filter were behind us, that would mean that we've already passed through this unbelievably narrow window of probabilities. And here we are. And maybe we're the first conscious life in the entire universe. Or maybe just within, 1,000 light years, whatever. But have to be longer than that because we've listened to a lot of places. Or the other part of the equation is, what is if the Great Filter that's keeping out all of these advanced societies, what if that's in front of us? That's a challenge we haven't faced yet? And people say things like, well, maybe AGI will be the thing that kills humanity, or maybe it'll be nuclear war, it'll be pollution, or anything like that. And I don't think it'll be any of those things. The only thing that I think could be the Great Filter that basically stops technological advancement and returns us to a state of savagery is too much leisure. I think that's the most likely case now. As I mentioned earlier, I spent a lot of time with the Cold War, saw lots and lots of occasions where it nearly came to it, saw two occasions where it was on, and only the fundamental humanity of two Russian military leaders, just not even leaders, just two Russian officers on two separate occasions, just their fundamental humanity stopped them from doing what they were directly ordered to do and saved us from World War III. So I don't think it's nuclear weapons. I think that the biggest threat to us is a simple de-evolution to sloth and mental stupidity and lack of reproductive drive and all of the things that we're seeing now. Now, whether or not that is a filter that applies to the entire society, or whether or not this is just a very, very, very comfortable form of euthanasia of 90% of the population, self-euthanasia. And what I mean by that is, I'm not talking about the government coming around and killing people. I'm not talking about people killing themselves. I'm just saying, like the passengers at the end on Wall-E, exactly, Roadrunner. What I'm saying is, we are I think we are most likely to fall into barbarism as a result of too much leisure. And that's certainly what we're seeing in a lot of our inner cities. Just to address this, Marisha Dark says, Bill, we've only just recently found that asteroid in Earth orbit that's been circling us since the 1960s. We're likely grossly overestimating our detection ability. Well, there's good news and there's bad news about that. The bad news is that there's lots of objects out there that we haven't detected, but the good news is that the big ones, the ones that really are big enough to really knock us back out, to reset the clock, are much larger. So yes, there are a lot of asteroids that we haven't detected yet, but the reason we haven't detected them is because we've detected the big ones, and these are now small enough so that we're talking about something that can basically destroy a city rather than destroy a region, or certainly far too small to destroy to reset the evolution clock. So I'm actually rather sanguine about that, and I'm rather proud of us as a species for doing these Skywatch programs, because we've really caught the stuff that we're detecting is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Risha says it also depends on how far ahead of us the aliens might be. Humans 200 years ago couldn't detect our stealth planes and satellites going right over their heads. Of course they could. Of course they could. That's ridiculous. You just go out on a dark night at sunset and watch the sky get dark. I guarantee you'll see 20 satellites. But that's not relevant to the point. The point is that I believe that too much leisure is going to take that 90 to 95% of everything. It's not just of people. It's just 90% of everything is just kind of, it's not mung. It's just meh. And whether it takes the whole society down, or whether it's something that is basically going to separate the self-actualizing people or not, I don't know. But yeah, Roadrunner says it sounds like a great time to become a drug dealer. Probably a better time even to get in the pharmaceutical business. Is that Sturgeon's Law? I knew it was something like that, Castle. 90% of everything is crap. Yeah. Well, I don't... to all of this to say, young people giving up on capitalism, we could be really facing the equivalent. How do I express this? Because I've never had this thought before, and so this is why it's a great question, but stick with me on this. what was the dominant misery of the Great Depression? The dominant misery of the Great Depression was that a quarter of the country was out of work. They could not find work, and therefore they could not feed themselves. They were facing real starvation. They were facing genuine hardship because they couldn't find work. And because they couldn't find work and there was no money around. How many people out there now are we having problems with the people who can't find work, and it has no effect on the society? You see what I'm saying? We could find ourselves in a world where 25% of the population can't find work, and the economy just goes humming along. And this is something that is it's very much larger than our kids turning to socialism. I don't want to get too deep into this because, to be honest with you, I need to go over it again and get a little more familiar with things. Usually when I see something that's interesting, I watch it the first time and I go, holy cow. And then I watch it the second time, and then the second time I begin to understand it better. Roshi Dark says, like Twitter after Elon fired half the staff. My understanding is that he fired 90% of the staff or higher. But the short form is that there were 4 players, and some of you will know them. There's a Scotsman, the Rothschilds, I think J.P. Morgan was one of them, and then one other guy. But basically they talked about the system that was set up starting in the 1600s that went something like this. Kings had borrowed money in the age of monarchies. Kings had borrowed money from various people to pay for their wars or whatever they needed. And if they didn't have the money to pay them back, then they would default on this. And the Scotsman basically went to the king, got some other investors together, convinced the investors of this plan, and basically said, look, we'll loan you 10 million pounds, so some insane amount of money back in those days, right? And here's the deal. We're going to loan you 10 million pounds. Again, that's an enormous amount of money. And says to the king, and here's the best part, you don't have to pay us back. I don't have to pay back. You don't have to pay us back. All you have to do is pay the interest. You never have to pay us back. All you have to do is pay the interest, which is a fraction, right? 5%, 3% of the total amount of money out. And they say, but you've got to guarantee that you pay the interest, and so the king can tax his subjects. Can't tax them enough to pay the 10 million pounds back, but he can tax them enough to make sure that the interest continues to get paid. Then the Rothschilds get together and they start making all of these things happen, and the debt gets internationalized and all the rest of this stuff. And now the system is set up so that as long as the interest payments are made, then the machine will keep going. And there's no other way to explain 35 or 40 trillion dollars of debt. There's no other way to explain it. If this was a rational risk analysis thing, then at some point, long time ago, people would have gotten out of, they would have taken their money out of this system. One of the things that I think the fourth of these people, who's like the final refinement, was the World Bank and other institutions would lend money to a place like, let's just say, Venezuela, for the sake of it, right? And Venezuela would have these really horrific payments that they have to make. And it wasn't, I don't think it was Venezuela, but it was some country that was under this kind of debt. I want to say this was in the 60s or something. And the country defaulted. They said, we simply cannot pay these bills. We can't. We are going to default on the loan. And what's that going to do to our credit or whatever? We don't have the money and we can't pay it. And this latest refinement was to say, okay, we're not going to accept you defaulting on the loan. We will just reschedule the loan at lower interest rates. And so what you set up is a system where payments are constantly coming from taxpayers through the government to these money sources, and it goes into perpetuity. The principal is never repaid, because essentially what you're buying is you're buying the debt. Now, I'm not enough of an economist to really understand this, but it's a very compelling argument and well put together argument. They're talking about these 4 different steps that had to happen to get to this world. But a reason I go into this kind of thing is to say that that money isn't what we understand it to be, and hasn't been for a long time. When somebody buys a house for $700,000, they don't take $700,000 out of the bank, give it to the guy who owned the house, and then you have to pay the bank back $700,000. When you sign that mortgage, $700,000 is fiated into existence. It's just created. It just appears into the system. And all of this to say that the economics of socialism, capitalism, and all this other stuff are now in a world that we regular folks don't understand, because the fundamentals of economics, classical economics, are actually pretty simple: supply and demand, credit and risk, risk reward, and risk, and benefit, risk reward, benefit. All of these things are easy to understand, but the system doesn't work that way anymore. So I find it really hard to believe that that society is going to collapse economically, because I had look, I feared this for most of my adult life, and I've certainly feared it since I started getting into the political commentary business, and I still worry about it because the whole thing is completely opaque. But I don't think the world can just shut down tomorrow because somebody decides to pull their money out. I think that this scheme is much more sophisticated than that. What it basically says is that the taxpayers will continue to work to pay the governments so that the governments can print the money necessary to pay these ever growing interest payments. I'm not going to interrupt the flow here to do it, but if somebody wants to take a minute, I'm sure you can find out very quickly. It might be at US Debt Clock or debtclock.com or whatever it is. But what is the annual payment on the national debt now? It's hundreds of billions of dollars. I don't know what it is, but it's hundreds of billions of dollars. And I think it's the second or third biggest thing in our budget. Eventually it'll be the biggest thing in our budget. So we are paying our federal income taxes to not buy government services more and more and more. We're paying our hard-earned money to pay interest on a debt, and that money goes to a pretty small group of people. It's more than the military budget, says Lord Bias. Wouldn't surprise me. A Roadrunner says, sounds like a joke I heard. A guy's father died, and one of the father's friends came up and said, 25 years ago I had to borrow $20 from your father, and he said I wouldn't have to pay him back as long as I paid interest of $1 a week. After 25 years, he never did ask me to pay back that $20. Oh my God, that's 3 times what I thought it was. Richard Dark says interest is now $968 billion currently. That's $1 trillion a year that we pay in interest. That's just interest. That buys us nothing. Doesn't buy us roads, doesn't buy us aircraft carriers, doesn't buy us health care, doesn't buy us anything. And the big question is, where does that $1 trillion a year go? Well, you end up sounding like a Marxist but reality is reality. So I don't think it's really, to kind of wrap this up for Roadrunner, I think ideas like socialism and capitalism even don't really mean what they used to mean, because money isn't money what it used to be anymore. It's moving to something else. And when you combine that with this incredible advancement of human productivity and wealth generation, the idea of a universal basic income, I think, is doable. I think it's catastrophic, and that's what scares me, because I think it's doable. Look, I don't know what percentage of the American population right now, but some significant percentage of the population right now has been on universal basic income for 30, 40 years now. Right? I mean, we've been paying people to live. We've been paying for their rent. We've been paying for their food. We've been paying for their housing, paying for their health. We've been doing all this for 30, 40 years. There's a significant and growing percentage of the population that's already there. Natasha fell down and broke her wrist, shattered the cap of her radius, and we had to wait in the emergency room for 7 hours, during which time we were given one pain tablet and 2 X-rays were taken, and the bill was $5,300. We had to pay something like $700 an hour for the privilege of waiting there in pain for health care that never arrived. Now, the insurance that we pay for, which also cost an arm and a leg, knocked that number all the way down from $5,000 to $1,500. That's what we had to pay, but we still had to pay it. I had to pay $1,500 out of pocket for Natasha to sit there for 7 hours in extreme pain and just be ignored by everybody. So why? Well, we're paying for the health care of people that come in when their wounds are so septic that their feet have to be amputated, or whatever the case may be. So the system is a mess. It's much too big. There's no accountability. And whether or not a great reset happens, I don't know. I do think, however, that the people who are getting the interest payments, if the thing ever was on the verge of collapse, I think the people that were getting the interest payments would have no problem saying, let's knock the debt in half and just keep the interest payments coming, because that's the economy, the big economy, the meta economy. And it pains me to say that. And if you told me that even 5 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it. But I mean, there's no other way to explain $40,000 billion in debt. So we'll see. Lord Bayer says if you make $65,000 a year, you actually have a lower lifestyle than someone who is making $28,000 per year on full benefits. Yeah. So now we get to the to the meta question. So in a case like that, clearly, why be a chump and go to work, pay taxes? Why not just get the same lifestyle for free? And here's where it gets very complicated. People that are doing drudgery work, if their drudgery work, like the two bound computer could have done that in certainly in a second or two, easily in a second or two. Just an old style computer could have done that in a second or two. So if that percentage of people who are falling out of work because of the elimination of drudgery jobs, then there's no real penalty to society. It's a penalty to the people who are out of work and trying to struggle and all that, but society doesn't get hurt if drudgery becomes automated, because drudgery doesn't produce value. The question is, what happens to I'm not trying to exclude people like plumbers and all of those people that are essential, really essential. Plumbers, carpenters, mechanics, all these other things. I'm not talking about blue collar jobs. I'm talking about drudgery jobs. We can afford to lose those jobs, but the question is, if everybody has a guaranteed basic income, who amongst us is disciplined enough to self-educate and then to get up every day and go to work? That's the question. I suppose you could say that there's a form of sort of a utopia, as close to utopia as we'll get. Although I think it's a dystopia for the vast majority of the population. But we just close this up by saying this. Let's say all this stuff kind of happens, and there's no reason why it couldn't. So let's look at the world, 30 years from now, or maybe even less than that, where there is a universal basic income. What does the world look like then? To me, it looks a lot like Ready Player One, which is not a good movie, but basically, everybody is involved in some form of entertainment. And they're going to be in it 24/7. And even then, that's discouraging. Every now and then I'll give myself a day off or give myself 5 hours, and I'll log on to DCS and I'll just play a whole campaign through, which is generally about a 3 or 4 hour process. And after, in the first hour and a half, 2 hours are fun, and finish a whole campaign when you got 35 guys with you on the same team, it takes about 3 or 4 hours. And after those 4 hours are over, I had a good time and I was entertained, but I felt really kind of empty. I sure as hell didn't need to do it again, not right at that moment. So I suspect that this may be maybe not a filter. Well, that's kind of the definition of a filter. Maybe it's a filter rather than a gate, where if this world exists, the only people that will be valuable, every person has value. I'm not trying to say that these are worthless lives, but the only people that will be valuable in the sense of advancing society and doing all the things that we consider to be noble, 5% of the population, maybe. I never forget, never cease to be disgusted and vindicated by listening to Jean-Luc frickin' Picard lecturing that savage capitalist back from the 20th century, that American capitalist. Well, what about the money? We don't have money here. No, we don't have money. Money has become obsolete, says the man with 2,000 acres and his own vineyard and a household full of servants. How's that work, Jean-Luc? The people that come and, tend the grape fields, are they doing that because they like to be out in the sun? I think rather not. Now, if it turns out I'd seen you with robots and out there, maybe you could make the case. So anyway, hopefully that's enough on that subject, but it's terrifying, interesting, and coming, I think. Rusha Dark, topic, supporters of terrorism. Mr. Virtual President, as you well know, the ongoing genocide in Darfur is one of the worst human rights violations in modern times, with carnage literally visible from space. The RSA forces in Sudan have been systematically killing non-Arab, non-Muslims in the region, trading billions of dollars worth of gold for weapons purchased from the UAE. It's recently come to light that most of these weapons are the very same ones that the U.S. has been selling to the UAE, which then get shipped to the RSA through proxies in Uganda and Chad. Hooray. Naturally, we would want to stop all such arms sales and impose sanctions, but there's a problem. The UAE just invested over $1 trillion in the U.S. economy. They also house some of our forward military bases against Iran and recently signed on to normalization of relations with Israel through the Abraham Accords. Is there any action we could take to stop the UAE RSA relations without it blowing up in our faces elsewhere? Should the U.S. take a more direct action in Sudan, given that we're directly responsible for arming these monsters, and the UN is completely useless at peacekeeping? How do you thread this needle? Also, what are your thoughts on the recent reports that Minnesota taxpayers are the largest funders of Al-Shabaab throughout fraudulent welfare schemes under Tampon Tim and incestuous Ilan? Meanwhile, Rep. Rashida Tlaib has declined to denounce chants of death to America coming from her own district in Dearborn, Michigan. Well, let's just start with the basics. I don't know how many religions are active in the United States currently, but I'm aware of the fundamental tenets of most of the major ones. And the only religion as written that is not only incompatible with American society but is antithetical to it is Islam. I think you can be a practicing Hindu, for example, in America and not have to compromise on your Hinduism or on your Americanism. But Islam is antithetical, and the simplest one of many of these points of opposition is simply this: do you have the right to draw a derogatory cartoon of Muhammad, yes or no? American values say yes you do. Islam values say no you don't. And if you are a devout Muslim, you have to make a decision. And my feeling is, is that any group of immigrants, no matter where they come from, if there's a group of immigrants that come here and they have a political or cultural mandate that is in direct opposition, not I'm not saying they have to be part of the founding culture, but if it's in direct opposition to it, then you simply say, no, goodbye. No, we are not obligated to bring people into our country whose purpose is to destroy the country. That's insanity, and we're not insane anymore. No, and you say, well, they're already U.S. citizens. Well, they can have their citizenship revoked, and apparently there are legal constitutional frameworks for doing that. And one of the things that we talked about in a recent Right Angle that They Walk Among Us is if you look at the crime statistics for a major city, let's say you have a city of 1 million people, the number of people who are committing, let's say, carjackings in a city of 1 million people, that number might be 200 people who are doing it hundreds of times. The guy who stabbed Irina on the train had 49 felony convictions, which makes you wonder how many felonies he actually committed if he had 49 felony convictions and was still out on the street. And the same thing for the guy who poured the gasoline on that woman in Chicago, set her on fire on the train. And the reason we're in this kind of problem, and I think this is true for Irina, I'm virtually positive it's true for the woman in Chicago, is that these young white liberal women support the idea of allowing these guys to get out 50 times. I think both of them had Black Lives Matter posters in their apartments because it's fashionable. I really wonder. I think the woman who was burned survived, if I'm not mistaken. I'm very curious to know if that has changed her mind. But in any event, the big question here, the meta question here, kind of like the meta issue with the previous question, the meta question is, does the native population get angry enough in time while there's still something to do about it? While there's still a pathway to do something about it? I don't know. It started. I can't believe more people are not talking about what's going on in Britain, but there is a constitutional crisis now where, if I understand the basics of it correctly, the king is essentially saying that that the current government is so destructive and so intentionally damaging the fabric of British society that he, as monarch, now has to step in for the first time in 300 years and demand new elections. It really comes down to, do you have the belly for it? Do you have the guts to do the unpleasant things that these suicidal sympathies have, to excise the cancers that these suicidal sympathies have caused? We have shown in America that we seem to be willing to do that, although it feels like momentum is slowing down on that score too. We certainly have stopped new immigrants from coming in. If there's any question about that. But we continue to deport people, and there's some sad stories, and there are some cases that are, I would say not most of them, but there are definitely some cases that really seem rather cruel, and cruelty comes with the enforcement of the law after 50 years of lawlessness have set up people to be put in a situation that really seems unfair to them. Scott Ott had a really interesting case. He was a jury foreman on a case where some kid was had stolen something, I think it was, and this was a kind of a 3 strikes kind of thing, And this kid had a relative, by today's style, stealing is a crime and you should go to jail. But the point that Scott was making was he had been caught and released so many times, had so many convictions, and and that when it came time to try this person, the person was found guilty. The automatic sentencing guidelines said that the minimum sentence that this kid would serve was 50 years. Now, I don't have a lot of sympathy for lifetime criminals. I have no sympathy for them at all. But the point here is that if this kid, this person, is a relatively young person, obviously, I don't know, 20, 18, 19, if this person had been sent to jail for 6 months and then sent to jail for 3 years and then sent to jail for 5 years, or 10, he wouldn't be facing 50 years right off the bat. Is that cruel? It's not unjust, but there is a certain kind of a cruelty to it that is a result of the system having failed to administer lesser punishments in order to deter that behavior. So, we've got, as far as the immigration thing goes, I think one thing that Islam is an aggressive religion. Islam routinely has Muslim prayers on the grounds of the Archbishop of Canterbury, which is the head of the Church of England. They pray on the church grounds as a way of showing this is our country now. England seems to be at the point of explosive decompression here, and the question is, would there be a solution? And I mean, is there a political solution to this? Farage is talking about, is talking about this. He's got a good chance to do something, but does Farage have the guts to really do what needs to be done? I kind of find it difficult to believe. I don't know if he's the guy. I've heard some people who are in conservative British politics say that he's not the guy to really get the job done. So there's that. And then as far as the stuff about the that's going on in Darfur's been a problem forever. Is it crusading time yet? Gummins, that's the question, man. That's the question. Is it crusading time yet? And when it gets to be crusading time, will there be enough crusaders left? One of the things that we have going for us is that the nature of Islam is so totalitarian that Islam is going to be perpetually in a state of informational and technological disadvantage. It has to be, because the tenets of Sharia lock down any free exchange of ideas. If you can't criticize Muhammad, you can't criticize the regime. If you can't criticize the regime, you can't innovate, you can't do any of those things. All of this is speculation. If I were, since it was addressed to the virtual president, I'm not entirely sure I want to get into bed with these people anyway, with UAE and all the rest of it. Just, I don't need the money. If I'm president of the United States, I don't mean I don't need the money. The country doesn't need the money as much as we need our moral core and our moral center. So I'm not sure I would have gotten into bed with them in the first place. But if I found myself inheriting that situation, I would basically say to our partners in the UAE or whoever is shipping these weapons to these people that are doing the murdering, I will say you are in danger of not only losing this sweet, sweet, sweet deal with with the Planet Earth prom queen, you are going to face real retaliation for this, because we don't really need your $1 trillion. We have $72 trillion a year. So, as a partner, I'm telling you, put an end to this weapons trading immediately. Because if you don't, then we're not going to just hurt the people that are doing the murdering. You're going to pay the economic price. I understand this is all done under the table and there's plausible deniability, and I get all of that. But if it was me talking to the UAE, I would say, we are going to begin a campaign of a counterterrorism campaign that is not a counterinsurgency campaign, and it is most certainly not a nation-building campaign. We are going to begin a process of using advanced signal intelligence and start militarily degrading the ability of the people who are doing the murdering to do the murdering. In other words, we're going to go out there and we're going to bomb some of these son of bitches into pink mist. If it turns out that after we do that, they're being resupplied with weapons, after we destroy them and the weapons in the field, if it turns out that they're getting new weapons, then we're going to assume those weapons are coming from you. And if it turns out that those new weapons are coming from you, then we'll go and destroy the new weapons as well. But this relationship with us is over, and not only are we not partners anymore, now we're your enemies, and we will do everything we can to cripple you economically. Any questions? And that's how I would handle it. I have no problem at all with using standoff weapons against people who are out there murdering innocent civilians. And I don't care if it's Christians murdering Muslims or Muslims murdering Christians or anything else. If we have the means to stop an ongoing genocide, and we do, without getting ourselves entangled, and I'm not talking about getting entangled in another foreign war. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm just talking about putting a couple subs off of a coast of a country and letting a couple of dozen tomahawks go their way and see if they get the message. Because one of the things that seems to be the case is that once we started blowing up these fishing trawlers that have 400 horsepower, 150, 200 horsepower outboard motors stacked right next to each other, because as everybody knows, when you go fishing, you generally want to trawl at about 60 knots. What we're finding is that the number of these fishing boats heading to the U.S. with no fishing gear on board, that number has apparently dropped precipitously because we done blown a few of them out of the water. And that's funny how that works, isn't it? So I would do the same thing against that. Marisha says against the USC because Sudan is landlocked. Yes, Sudan is landlocked and submarines can't go inland, but cruise missiles can. All of this chicanery and all of this mischief comes about because I'll just come out and say it, because the country that has been given by God unmatched military supremacy and unmatched moral sensitivity is afraid to use the power that we've been given. And we abdicate the use of that power, and therefore these things proliferate. I cannot say this clearly enough. Not under any circumstances would I talk about putting American troops on the ground. I'd be extraordinarily reluctant to put special forces in there, but the reason I would consider that is because the special forces guys might come begging me to do it. Please, Mr. President, let us go in and do this. I know some of these guys. But yeah, we just, are we the world's policeman? Not really, It's not really policing. I mean, policing means, to me, if we were the world's policeman, it would mean that we would have troops on the ground in Darfur. And I'm not talking about that. That's the farthest thing from my mind. I want to get as far away from that as possible. but we might be the world's Judge Dredd. You know, we might be providing the find out part to the F around equation. I'd have no problem with that whatsoever. Okay, moving on here. Braden Higby. Howdy from Idaho. Hello, Idaho, my favorite place. I'm a Zoomer, and I'm doing better than my parents were at my age. To me, that is the definition of the American dream. My Zoomer coworkers and my college friends are all also in the same boat. Out of the Zoomers I know, 7 out of 8 are achieving this standard, so the cries that boomers killed the American dream for my generation are at least over-exaggerated. I kind of agree with that. I'll come back to that in a minute. Small sample size, and I know there are people out there who have made the best decisions they can and still gotten screwed, but I cannot believe my situation is unique. How much of my generation's problems are from unrealistic expectations, according to a 2024 study financed? Financial success to Gen Z is a $587,000 salary. That's what you need to be successful. And an unwillingness to sacrifice, for example, an unwillingness to move to find opportunity, or am I just an out-of-touch punk that got lucky in the golden land of opportunity that is Idaho? Politically, how do you beat someone who is telling us that these expectations are reasonable and that it's those capitalists that are keeping us from our dreams? I see a lot of this out there. Oh, you boomers say that Zoomers are lazy and stuff, but you guys were able to have a single working household, a single parent working, one stay-at-home parent, and a house cost $17,000. Yes, a house cost $17,000, and a good salary was $18,000 a year. I mean, let's at least have that fundamental level of fairness. And I think if you showed a Zoomer what that boomer house looked like, without air conditioning in many cases, without 2,000-3,000 square feet, and if you showed them the cars that we were buying, the cars were so much cheaper relative to income. Yeah, that's true. That AM radio, they didn't have seatbelts for a while. They certainly didn't have air conditioning for a while. You had to roll up the windows. You had all these other things that they put into the cars. You couldn't start them from remote. You didn't have a fob. You had to go young, 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 and so on, so on, and so on, and so on. But so it's not. So they tend to think that boomers had their lifestyle at a much cheaper price, but that's not true. We had nothing like their lifestyle. We didn't have Nintendos or PlayStations or any of that stuff. We had we had our bikes, and I think the standard transmission, among other things, no anti-lock brake systems, no nothing. So I think if they were to switch places with us, which would be lovely, it'd be just lovely for us to be able to do this. It would really be lovely for them to live a week in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, because on one level they would be appalled, and on another level I think they'd be quite shocked and surprised at how fundamentally happier we were. The level they'd be appalled at is, first of all, they just wouldn't have phones. And they just wouldn't have phones. When you see these, get your bingo cards out, you see police body cam videos, the first thing people do when they get pulled over is get on their phone. When the police are telling them to get out of the car, they're on their phone. They just think if they keep scrolling, nobody's going to do anything to them. But just imagine, I'm at the point now where if I leave my phone at home, and I don't, I'll go back and get it. I feel kind of like, is the world going to fall apart during the 3 hours that I'm going to be here without my phone? But no, and you don't know where your friends are. If you didn't call them the night before at their home number while they were home getting ready to go to bed, then you have no idea that you're supposed to meet at 2 o'clock today. Can't just ring them up, man. You can call their house, but if they're gone, they're gone. And so all of this, But I think they'd also be really quite amazed at how much lighter things were. I think they'd be shocked at how much less toxic the world environment was. I think they'd be amazed at at the intensity of the human interactions, how real they were. They'd have to be there longer than a week. They really have to be there at least a month or two. I've seen a few things, I think I mentioned this before, a few things on AI things on like Facebook and stuff, and it's like, hey, what was it like during the 80s? And then you would see like, guys riding their choppers, man, and all of us, doing all of this fun stuff. Marusha Dark says more actual racism though. Arguably somewhat more white racism, but racism is not a white person problem in 2025. Racism is a person of color issue in 2025. Racism is going one way in 2025, and it's been going one way for 20 years. So there are no racists that come anything close to the racism I've seen from black people towards white people. Nothing. No, I have not seen anything remotely close to that. So I don't buy that aspect of it. I think in the 70s, the black families had not fallen apart yet. There were still black fathers and there was still respect, and I just remember that as being a much looser time. And certainly, if you look at something like the Dean Martin roasts or whatever the case may be, the ability to joke about things is what disarmed this stuff. I don't know. Yeah, go to Inspiration Point and watch the submarine races with your girlfriend. I am so embarrassed to admit this. When I was the first couple days when we moved from Bermuda to South Florida, we lived on Key Biscayne, which is Rickenbacker Causeway. And when first time I was going off the island on a school bus or something, I think it was. And I'm looking out over the causeway. I still have dreams about that causeway, actually. And somebody said something about, maybe it was one of my friends, probably was one of my friends, saying, oh man, those cars are out there watching the submarine races. And I thought, holy, I bet that must be the coolest thing to watch, man. I love submarines. I think submarines are awesome. That'd be fantastic. When are the submarine races? When do they start? When's the next one? I was as disappointed to find out that submarine races were not really submarine races, that there were no submarine races. I was as disappointed to find that out as I was disappointed to find out that the Underground Railroad was not an actual underground railroad. When I heard about the Underground Railroad during the Civil War, I really thought that there was an underground railroad that got the slaves to the north, and when I found out that it was just a bunch of safe houses and routes and couriers and crossings and things, I was brutally disappointed. So, there you go. And Marcia Dark says sea monkeys aren't actually monkeys. No, they do come alive, live about an hour if I remember correctly, and but they don't have little hats and briefcases, and that's what they were telling us. Those were the lies that the boomers were raised on, and we've never gotten over it. We were the greatest generations, just ruined our lives and stole our youth, and the X-ray specs didn't work either. And the Polaris submarine was just a cardboard submarine, which really pissed me off for most of my life. And then somewhere around 10 years ago, I saw a photograph of the actual Polaris submarine, which looks nothing like the thing in the back of Boy's Life, but does look bitchin' cool anyway, and I wish I'd had one. Anyway, moving on. Road Rider, first, nice work on the website. Love the Cloudflare anti-bot. Don't mind the wait at all. Well, thank you. We're still having some problems, but we're getting those worked on still. At least we got a fast website, and we seem to be doing a little better than we were 3-4 months ago. This new guy, American guy, is not, he's certified. And it took me, honestly, I'm such a naive child that it took me 3 months of working with this developer from Pakistan or something for me to realize that it wasn't like, no, we've got a uniquely bad problem. It's just that this guy doesn't know anything about WordPress or integration with any of these pay services. He knows less than I do, but he's hung out a shingle on Fiverr, and I looked at it. I said, the guy's got 450 5-star reviews, and I just realized they're all from his friends. They're from a review farm. Anyway, back to Road Rider. Next, a kind of geopolitical and immigration question. The question might seem generic for obvious reasons, but I think it sheds some light on the inner workings of immigration more than most. The question: what prevents a person from one country to visit the USA when that person is a good person, not a criminal, most likely gainfully employed in their own country of residence? Let's say the imaginary country is called Ruski Uni. Is the problem that the U.S. won't issue a visa for this person? Let's say it's a very nice young woman just because she hails from Ruski Uni? Or is it the country of residence who won't let the young woman apply for a visa or even travel to the U.S.? Generic, hypothetical question, of course, simply to gain more education about immigration. Thanks. Well, strangely enough, your hypothetical example here correlates pretty closely to a real-world problem that I have with my stepdaughter, who's from the country of Russia, which is very apparently close to Ruski. We have tried for 9 years now to have my stepdaughter visit us in America on a tourist visa, and she's been declined twice. And the reason she was declined was because they asked her if you have relatives living in the United States or in the United States at the time, and she answered honestly both times, and they just went declined. The second time this happened was in 2023. The first time was in 2018, I think. In 2023, we went in. We had to send her to another embassy. The first time she tried at Moscow, second time she tried at Kuala Lumpur, of all places. And we said, Diana, just make sure that they understand this. The relative that you have living in the United States came here on a legal visa. When she decided to stay, the first thing that we did was go to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Immigration Services, applied for the permanent resident card, got the temporary conditional permanent resident card after a year of showing that we really were living together and that really we're married. And we had to pull out all these photos. It wasn't just she's paying me 10 grand to get into the U.S. And then after 2 years of being on a probationary green card, she got the permanent green card. And then after that, she got another year that we had to wait. And then she finally became a U.S. citizen. So please tell them that both of your parents are U.S. citizens who, between us, have never been arrested for a misdemeanor, have done everything by the book, absolutely stuck to the letter of the law throughout the entire process. And she told them that, and they said, we don't care, it's too much of a risk. So I should have just brought her in through Mexico while I had the chance, you know? But wasn't going to do that. So I mentioned at the beginning of the show that a very good friend of mine had his son die of a heart attack. This is the guy who's been working on the case for us. Why somebody who is one of the best men I know, and by the best men I mean sincerely, one of the kindest, most capable, most patriotic, most generous men in the world has to suffer by what, by all accounts, is the single greatest tragedy that can happen to a human being on this earth, and that is having your children die and have them, well, I guess it doesn't really matter how they die, but just you want to talk about a lightning bolt out of the blue. It's nothing that matches that. Why does this happen? Natasha asks a lot more why questions than I do. She asks why about everything. I say, honey, there are things that we're not allowed to know. You can ask why all you want to, but we're not allowed to know. And we can't know. And so chasing the why is ultimately just prolonging the agony of it. It's there, it happened. I believe it's there for a reason that we will understand one day. I'd like to believe that. If I'm wrong, that's fine too. If I'm wrong, this philosophy helps me cope with the psychological stress right now, and I happen to believe this philosophy. But in any event, there we are. Thank you very much for that, Dave. Big Boutte says, be sure to tell your wife again that all of the Strato Nation loves her and is praying for her family back in Russia, and let your stepdaughter know that too. We do, And out of nowhere, West of Eden comes in with a $99 super chat, and I'm wondering if is has somebody been renamed, or is this a new? Is that you, John? Is that what I'm asking? In any event, thank you. Yes, and his name is John Eden. Thank you very much once again for this heroic. That's the term I've just coined, and I'm going to use a lot of it. Heroic generosity. Thank you. It's deeply appreciated. You have no idea how much it means to us, and to me especially, to have somebody come in and just essentially every time you show up, just drop $100 in the tip jar. It's phenomenal of you, and everybody here, if you read the comments on both streams, appreciates it every single time. Yeah, USS John Eden, the flagship of the U.S. Honest to God, I really think that's really true. Thank you very much, John. Or West of Eden, I should say. Astronerd says, my 33-year-old son is living with us under hospice care. I know what you're talking about, Astronerd. I feel so much sympathy for you. I want to preface what I'm about to say because I don't want you to bite my head off halfway through the sentence. I understand how painful it is losing a pet, and that gives me a shadow on the wall of the cave of the kind of pain that this must cause. I have nothing to compare that to, and I never will. But I as a shadow on the wall of the cave, I simply can't imagine how you bear it. I really don't. Yeah. So. Yeah, Marisha point. So the problem was obviously up until 2022, it was a lot easier for this to work out with Russia. The Ukraine invasion certainly threw a monkey wrench into that mechanism. And prior to the Ukraine invasion, we had COVID for 2 years. So realistically, she tried in 2018, and then we got locked out from that point forward. Locked out. We're still working on it. But my friend is. I mean, I don't know how you. Oh, well, you don't recover from that. You never recover from it. And he made a great point prior to this happening, to this tragedy happening. He made a great point of screaming at the State Department and saying, "You don't understand. This isn't a bureaucratic mistake. This is causing actual people tremendous emotional pain. This is a real person. They're all real people, and you need to do something about that." I'm going to let another couple days go by before I write him directly, but I heard about it through a mutual friend, and I told my mutual friend, please tell him if he needs anything, groceries, cat food, pet food, anything. He lives in L.A. I'd be happy to do it. Anyway, that's the latest there, Road Rider. We got a Bob Neef, Jacob Belchek, and an Eric Blake. Okay. Bob Neef, about a year ago, you were thinking hopefully that perhaps the 80-year cycle's hard times had ended with the 2024 Trump election. Have you rethought that? In my opinion, it seems like the left is doubling down on stupid, and things seem to have a powder keg out there. Maybe I just listened to too much news. I saw a poll that said that Trump was down 40 points with independents since January. The special election in Tennessee, if that had gone really blue, we would have been really cooked. We are less than a year from the midterm elections. I'm glad that this civil war on the right is happening now and not 6, 7, 8 months from now. I like to think that by the beginning of summer, well, it's certainly dying down because, frankly, you can't maintain this level of you can't keep grifting a story and changing your story every day for a year and have the same level of belief, or at least there are people who will believe Candace forever and nothing can change their minds. And that's the way it is, and okay. But those people that were on the fence, I think, are certainly starting to fall off. And And we'll see. I certainly feel two things that have happened since I mentioned that. One of them is that clearly the momentum has slowed down. The first warning signs for me came pretty early, and that was when Elon and Trump fell out over Doge, because Elon said, look, I thought we're trying to cut money from this budget to get this budget back into shape, and I thought that too. And then all of a sudden Republicans pass this big beautiful bill which has got more spending in it, adds to the deficit, and Elon kind of says, well, I guess we're not serious about this after all. I'm on Elon's side on that one. But the one that really, really, really hurt was was not the Epstein files thing. It wasn't the existence of the Epstein files. It was the handling of the Epstein files thing. Donald Trump says to his supporters, if you're interested in the Epstein files, then you're not really a supporter of mine. That's just, I'm not still carrying a grudge about it, but certainly it's the bloom is off the rose on that one. That was really, really, really destructive for Trump. Gave a lot of ammunition to the left, but I saw a lot of people just check out on that, and that was just plain. I don't know how a man who's usually that well tuned to a room could make a mistake like that and continue to make it. Curitan says, are there any Bill Whittle fans like Candace as well? Or is there any overlap? Yeah, I'm sure there are. I was a Candace fan too when Candace was conservative and pulling people over to the conservative cause. Before she was saying that Trump is a sellout and essentially a foreign agent, and all of these people that put together TPUSA are the ones that were in on the assassination and all the rest of the stuff. It's like, I don't know. So I am not nearly as optimistic as I was before. However, I am still, I believe that the Democrats cannot unlock themselves from their identity politics, that the civil war on the right that we've seen is a precursor of a 2 or 3 orders of magnitude civil war that's going to happen on the left, between what's left of the traditional Democratic voters and ever more progressive, insane left. That's going to really split that party down the middle, and there's been a lot of damage done. Tucker's done a lot of damage, as somebody just Gummins pointed out, and and Nick Fuentes is just scooping up all of these people with this enthusiastic declaration of telling people what they want to hear, which I personally don't think can last, but we'll see. I've been wrong about things before, but so I'm not as optimistic as I was. I still think as it's the oldest political saw in the world, right? But if the Republicans ran unopposed, we would lose. There's that. Jacob Belcheck. Hail, Bill. Hail, Jacob. Been thinking about the civilizational competition situation we find ourselves in. I've seen a graph going around a few times that the charts how the 4 large ethnic groups, white, Hispanic, Black, and Asian, view each other and themselves. The distributions are variable, but there's one clear takeaway. White people broadly seem to view the other ethnic groups mostly favorably, with basically no favor one way or the other. All of the other ethnic groups enormously prefer their own group over all the others, and the internet is replete with examples in no particular order, and understanding that these are broad generalizations. Indian tendency to enter a workspace, aggressively hire more Indians and hollow out entire companies. Reflexive tribal defense of black criminality by other black people, anecdotes about Hispanic people in the food service industry who openly upcharge white people while discounting fellow members of La Raza. I do not like Nick Fuentes or the rumbling white nationalism that seems to be attached to him, but I absolutely understand anyone who would look at the scenario, scratch their heads, and think that maybe it's time for the white people, 10 to 12% of the population, a clear minority, to start favoring their own people too. What say you? One of the best things I heard about this was from Gen Z young woman who said, look, we've grown up our entire lives being told that we're racist. They're without question the most racially integrated, least racist group of people in the country, in the history of the country, and they are still being tarred with it. And not only have they not done anything wrong, they've done everything in their power, to support BLM and all the rest of it, and they still get called racist. And Gen Z is waking up to the fact that there's no win for them. Gen Z males are in a much worse position than females. Gen Z males have been demonized since before they entered the earth. And they were born into a society that told them that they were the scum of the earth, that they were responsible for all the evil in the world, they were responsible for slavery, they were responsible for racism, they're responsible for hate, they're responsible for this, they're part of the patriarchy, blah, 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 blah. When in fact, the data shows, as you point out, clearly they are the most accommodating, the most welcoming, the most generous demographic in the history of this country. Bubber says Nick will win because nobody else is being fully honest. You're largely right about not anybody else being fully honest. It's just I don't know what Nick winning looks like. I've heard what his advice is: go out there, make money, gain influence, go to college, get connections, get politically involved. So far, the Groypa Army has been a distraction and a destructive force. Essentially, the tactics that they've employed, and that Nick is telling them to employ, is a disruption tactic. Go out there and break up MAGA rallies with tough questions and heckling, and do this to TPUSA and all the rest of it. That's a very different thing than putting together a movement that gathers more people than this niche that he's found. It's a significant niche, and it's an important niche, and he's telling them. I've said it so many times before. I really just mean it. He's 80 to 90% right about everything. It's not like he's right about 80 or 90% of the things. He's 80 to 90% right about everything. He just goes and draws the wrong conclusions from this. Not even the wrong conclusions, the easy conclusions. And ranting and raving and getting people angry is one thing. Getting people hopeful enough and motivated enough to go out and actually do something is something else, something constructive. Because throwing stones through windows is a spoiler, and he could in fact be a very effective spoiler, but that's not winning. That's just at the very best, it's king making by denying a certain demographic to one side or the other. How much have I listened to his actual show? I've listened to him quite a lot, actually. Copy Shinato. I've listened to a significant amount of his content. Not so much lately, but for about, certainly a couple months there, I was listening to him frequently, and listening to the full extent of the clips, not just the complete highlights. Just find there to be a fundamental contradiction between the argument, which is a real argument, an important argument, which is saying that white people are losing the cultural history of this country, and they're losing it to minorities that are more and more claiming aspects of this country's accomplishments that they did not, in fact, accomplish. And at the same time, he's telling young men marriage is gay, heterosexuality is gay, don't get married, don't have kids. I understand how defective Gen Z women are as a general cohort. They're irredeemable sluts, most of them. And so I get how, I think I understand better than he does, how a society that produces promiscuous women destroy themselves. And there, without question, we are in a society that is so over feminized. It's so unbelievably over feminized that that they think they're getting away with it. Every now and then, I'll see a TikTok confession where somebody will say, I met a guy, a young woman, attractive young woman, say, I met a guy, I really liked him, really liked him. This was the guy I really wanted to settle down with. I didn't tell him about my OnlyFans account until we were really well established. We've been dating exclusively for 3 months now. We've been talking about, marriage. And so last night, or this morning, or earlier tonight, or whatever, I finally told him about my OnlyFans account, and he has, he just checked out. He said done, and she doesn't understand why. Every single man out there understands why. I've never met a man, ever once have I met a man who likes these either lip injections or lip implants, ever. I've never met a man who likes these claw fingernails. I've never met a man who likes these huge eyelashes. I've never met a man who liked any of this stuff. We hate it. And these women just, they just keep doing it because it's all about attention instead of virtue. So, the older women that are now starting to hit the wall, the biological wall, in their mid to late 30s and early 40s, those women are starting to realize that they got robbed, and they're coming home to their fully owned houses or condos in their BMWs from their 6-figure jobs as executives, and coming home to their cats and wondering why they're alone and why they don't have kids and why men don't want to date them. And they go out on dates and they tell these men about the business success that they've had, and they own their own home and they own their own business, and the men just kind of really give a shit. Honestly, that doesn't impress me. And they're mystified. Feminism has done so much damage. It's almost I'm really beginning to think feminism has done about as much damage to society as slavery has. It has just absolutely wrecked biology and happiness and the future. And yet, out there away from the cities and out there off of the social media radar and influencers, the most perfect word ever. When you say somebody's an influencer, what does that mean? It means nothing. Influencing them to what? Are they inspiring them? Not really. Are they providing brain rot entertainment? In a lot of cases, all of this stuff. It's like influencing who to what end? I'm an influencer. You're a narcissist and an idiot and a rotten person on top of it. You'll do anything for attention. You're the kind of person people should run away from, and they are. Yes, and that's a great point too from Regulus 000. They doubled the workforce and halved the salaries. Yes, exactly. I wouldn't date any of these people. any of these women. Really. I just look at now. I understand there's selection here. I get it, and I'm not immune to that. But look at the Whatever podcast, and you look at these women who are, you know, some of them are 3s and 4s, most of them are 6 or 7s. They're all convinced that they're 10s, and they're dumber than a box of rocks. They're just so stupid. And even the ones that are really genuinely hot, you know, some of these OnlyFans girls who are really, really hot, and they think that the world is laid out at their feet, but what they don't understand is that the men that they're interested in, these high-value men, yes, they want somebody beautiful, and yes, they want somebody that's sexually hot, but they also need somebody that they can talk to, because they're going to be going on airplane rides with them around the world. They're going to be driving everywhere with them, and you can't talk to these women for 30 seconds. They can't name 3 countries. They're dumb as they're just dumber than a box of hammers. And they think that the world, you know, and the argument is made is that the reason that these women are so toxic is because there's so many simps, because there's so many. Look, OnlyFans exists because there are simps that are willing to pay for this. So, you know, you got to work with your own material. Speaking as a male, I don't understand much that I could do about changing female psychology, but I could do something about male psychology. And the first thing we got to do is to cut off the money supply to these 304s by simply cutting the simp connection, the simp conveyor belt. So, you know, there you go. Jacob Bagchuck back with another immigration question. I know you made statements in the past that the U.S. should try to warm a relationship with India as an agent against China. I see the potential there. On the other hand, yeah, I'm having many on the other hand thoughts myself here. Have you seen the discussion of the Indian term of Izzat? It is difficult to translate to English, but in brief, it describes a zero-sum game of collective honor that conflates moral victory with physical victory. Under Izzat, losing is unrighteous and winning is righteous, which creates a system of aggressively short-term thinking that encourages cheating, lying, and violence. The thought process appears to be very similar to the instinctive Soviet or CCP towards deception. What say you? I find myself, you know, just kind of like, and not consciously, it's like a large part of this, of course, is algorithm-driven, but I'll find something that I'm interested in, and so if it's something I'm interested in, I'll watch a couple of them, and then the algorithm will feed me more. So the long-term outcome is I'll spend a month or two completely surrounded by one topic, and then I'll drift to something else, and then I'll get nothing but that topic. So it's just a series of deep dives. And one of the things that I've been watching a lot of recently, and I've seen a few of them earlier, but I've been watching fairly consistently now, so I keep getting them. Excuse me. Are these American hackers who are foiling Indian scammers? And good Lord, is that ever satisfying? It's as satisfying as watching these toxic, entitled, drunk, 22-year-old princesses get locked up in the back of a patrol car and have them kick the windows all the way to the jail the first time they've ever been told no in their lives. Watching these scammers go down under American anti-scammer guys is glorious. Glorious. Watching these guys trap these scammers, most of it consists of most of the victories consists of them spending 5 or 6 hours tying these guys up, getting them to believe that they're going to get $6,000 or $8,000, in some cases $4 or $5 million, and then they intentionally, acting like old people, they like intentionally just keep redeeming these cards that they're supposed to give them the numbers to so they can redeem them, and you just hear these guys screaming at the, no, you MRFer, no, don't touch that, I told you, what is the matter with you, what does the matter? And listening to these guys watch this money fly away is satisfying, but to be perfectly honest with you, to me that seems a little bit timid. I think when we have access to these guys' computers, they call who they think is a 80-year-old woman, and they call 80-year-old women and tell them there's a problem with their computers, a problem with their payment. And my mom was like this. They're just so completely gullible. And they say, we'll take care of this for you, madam. And they set up a believable scam, and then they take over control of your computer, and they end up wiring themselves money or whatever the case may be. In the case of these anti-scammer American hackers, they get control of this guy's computer, but his computer is a Potemkin computer. It's set up to look like an old woman's computer. There's no money in any of these bank accounts. So while they're trying to get this non-existent money, and they've got this two-way connection set up, they're controlling this guy's shell computer, but he's also controlling their computer. And what these guys generally do is go in and delete all of their files, all of their leads, and so on. And they deprive them of money that they think they're going to steal. But I think that if an American hacker is contacted by or contacts a known scam center, I think that American scammer ought to go in there and vacuum all of the cash that he can out of that bank account and then donate it to some kind of charity. I mean, I don't want to just see them get foiled. I want to see them bankrupted. I want to see these guys broken. I don't want to just foil their scam or get their hopes up to dash them. I want to see money vacuumed out of their accounts. And I think that would be absolutely epic. Epic. But watching them do that, and they, these guys are our American guys are so skilled that they're able to hack into these guys' webcams. You can see the whole office, like a whole room full of people. In some cases, like 30, 40, 50 of them, all working scams at the same time. And they're sucking money out of the most vulnerable people in America, which are like really, really old people who basically don't. No, these are not Somali scammers. These are Indian scam centers, highly organized scam centers. And they're becoming more sophisticated. Oh, by the way, Natasha is at a seminar in Florida. She'll be back in a couple days. She was supposed to fly there on Sunday night on the red eye. Sunday night was the night that was the end of Thanksgiving holiday, and we gave ourselves plenty of time, but Sepulveda Boulevard was shut down. We waited an hour and a half, and we went 2 blocks. It was shut down. It wasn't slow. I was expecting it to be slow. It was shut down. So this was Sunday night. She needed to be there on Monday, and we, make a long story short, so we had to rebook all this stuff. We booked it months in advance. So we decide this flight is gone. We haven't moved a quarter of a mile in an hour and a half or 2 hours, and it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes before the flight leaves, and she's not even checked in yet. The flight's gone. So I managed to get out of this gridlocked Sepulveda Boulevard, and I find a side street, and I pull over there. I go to the American Airlines website on my phone, looking for a phone number, and there isn't one. It's not like it's hard to find. There isn't one. It just is not a phone number there. So Natasha says, well, let's ask ChatGPT. So ChatGPT comes back with a number. I call this number, and ring, 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 American Airlines. I thought, wow, ChatGPT has really got this thing down. I said, hey, how's it going? We're at LAX. Sepulveda Boulevard is essentially just closed down. We're supposed to be on this flight at 11 o'clock. We're going to miss the flight. I need to reschedule for the morning, and we got to make this connection, blah, 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 all this other stuff. And he was okay. And we don't saw any signs of the airport being slowed down or anything. And something. And I just got a kind of a bad vibe, and the reason I got a bad vibe was because the phone got picked up right away. And this guy had a bit of an accent. Wasn't an Indian accent, but was an accent. So my spidey sense starts tingling, and I said, "You know what? I got something I need to do here. I got a yeah. Let me just deal with this. Uh, YZF Hornet says, Bill, I would suggest take the Van Nuys Flyaway next time. Well, if we had, she would have been stuck in a bus instead of the car because this was not a question of traffic. The road was closed on Sunday night. The road was closed, and there were thousands and thousands of cars backed up trying to get to the airport. Couldn't get there. I know the airport. I was a limo driver for 4 years. I went there 5 times a day for 4 years. This was just shut down. So so the guy said, well, I can call you back in 20 minutes, or whatever. And I said, sure. So we're trying to see if there's any other options. I got a call back, and it says it's from someplace in Utah on the call ID. And the guy gets back on the phone. He says, "Hi, Mr. Whittle. We've got the. Did you want to make these changes to the reservation?" And I said, "Yeah." And I gave him the credit card number. And after I gave him the credit card number, but before I gave him the expiration and the security code, I said, "There's something feels really wrong here. There's just something wrong." I never got the on hold music. I don't remember if he said hello American Airlines. It just feels wrong. The number came from ChatGPT. It was the right number for American Airlines. It was the number that ChatGPT gave us anyway. I said, let me call you back. And so I hung up. And 3 or 4 minutes later, I get a call back again. I didn't pick it up. And then another 4 minutes later, I get another call back. Didn't pick it up. And another 5 minutes after, I get another call back. I didn't pick it up. And I said, we got close there, honey. There's no way this is American Airlines. There was just something about the scheduling just didn't feel right, and that was a nearly dodged a bullet, because not only would have had access to the bank account, which means not only would we not have had a ticket that was like $300 or something, but he would have had access to the literally hundreds of dollars that we have in that bank account. And so anyway, those people can go burn in hell, and I'd be happy to fly them there. So there was that. When I finally did talk to American, it was pleasantly. I said, my wife missed the flight last night because the airport was blocked. We could not get a number. This was when I got back to the studio, and I said, so I put her on an American flight this morning to Miami, and I just want to call to make sure that the return trip hasn't been canceled since she missed the outbound flight. And the woman said, well, I'm afraid that reservation was canceled. And so I said, okay, so what's it going to cost to bring her back? And she said, well, we have to book it as a one-way flight now from Miami to Los Angeles, and we have to charge you the rate now, which is 5 days away from the return date or something. And I said, so let me make sure I understand this correctly. We miss a flight because of the roads to the airport are blocked. I paid for the trip from Los Angeles to Miami. Then I had to pay for another ticket on top of that on your airline from Los Angeles to Miami. And now you're telling me I have to pay another $400 to come back on the round trip ticket that I've already purchased, and that seat you have sold twice. Well, that's the policies of our airline, sir. I'm sorry, Joe. And they said, she said, now, if you'd like, we can send her home, instead of direct, we can send her home via JFK. So do the geography. You're in Florida, 4-hour flight to JFK. Really? Yes, we have a flight where she could fly to JFK, and at JFK there'd be a 4-hour layover, and then she could fly to Los Angeles. And I said, are there window seats available on this? No, these are center aisle seats are all that we're able to offer in this case. How much would this cost? Well, the rebooking would probably be about $20, but then with you say there's a bag on 2 legs, and there's $50 for this, $50 for that. That kind of. I said, you know what, just West of Eden is here, and he, by that point, I just booked her back home. Just, it's just really annoying. I don't know. Anytime we have anybody who has any kind of problem with BillWhittle.com, they want to cancel or whatever, or they say, well, I'm disputing this charge. It's like, this is a no-brainer for me. It's like, of course we'll refund your money. You get a full refund immediately. Thank you for the support over the years. Absolutely, it's, deeply appreciated. The idea of fighting with your customers like that is, I don't know. I just had a really smart dad when it came to hospitality issues, that kind of thing. All right, last one for the night. Tonight, the case of the pipe plot twist from Mr. Eric Blake. Marusha says, I've not been on a plane in the last 15 years. Well, I first got on a plane 60 years ago. More than that, 63 years ago. And it's gotten worse every time. But back in 1960, would have been 63, I guess, on a Pan Am 707 from New York to Bermuda, everybody wearing suits and ties, and they would roll out these tables with these beautiful hot roast beef dinners and lots of leg room, and it was no TSA, not being packed in there like that. It was freaking awesome. All right, here we go from Eric Blake. So, Bill, have you heard the news today that Kash Patel's new and improved FBI has quickly done what his predecessor's bureau apparently could not, find the January 6th pipe bomber? And furthermore, it becomes pretty clear why the case was allowed to go cold beforehand when you know the nature of this perp. He's an Antifa punk who apparently had legal access to grind against the Trump administration. Imagine my frickin' surprise. In other words, he didn't just fit the narrative of He just didn't fit the narrative of January 6th, and of course that's assuming he wasn't acting at the behest of some lefty higher-ups, but we'll probably learn more about that with this trial. What do you think about that, Bill? I have heard so much criticism of Kash Patel about the Epstein thing, and then Candace starts her whole, personal investigation where she's convinced a significant percentage of the population, and maybe the majority of the population now, that the guy who shot Charlie Kirk wasn't really the guy who shot Charlie Kirk. And the reason is because all the evidence points to him, so it can't possibly be him. I don't have I've always liked Kash Patel. I didn't know him until relatively shortly before he was nominated, but I like him and respect him, and I absolutely adore Dan Bongino. And when Bongino was ready to walk over the Epstein thing, I thought, there's some real nastiness going on. But Kash Patel, his FBI has caught more people in the first 3 weeks of his administration, of the FBI's top 10 list, first 2 or 3 months rather of his administration. Kash Patel's caught more of the top 10 than the Biden administration did in 4 years. So I am impressed with him, and speaking for myself and myself only, I find that he is restoring my faith in the FBI. He's got a lot of work to do. He didn't cause that loss of faith, but he's doing it for me. I can't believe that Comey and Letitia James and all of these other people are going to walk. Yeah, I've seen a lot of comments come up recently that Bondi's really a part of this problem, and I liked her going into it, but she has not handled this well, and her handling of the Epstein thing was catastrophic. So if she's not working, they need to get rid of her. And the whole thing feels like it's slowing down, like it's just like you ran a truck into a like into the mud at high speed, and you're just zooming along at first, and you're just slowing down. So my short answer, Eric, is that I like this FBI better than the previous incarnation. I'd like to see some justice done. I'd like to see some people in jail. And more than anything, I would like to not see any more of this handling of these issues the way that President Trump handled the Epstein thing. The damage he did to himself is absolutely monumental. I mean, people were so cynical about government and had hoped against hope that his election would change that. And I'm one of those people, and I still believe it. He's done an amazing job of turning around this 30-year-long momentum. But the way that he handled that was just, it could not have been worse. Could not have been worse. So Eric Blake says that Bonnie needs time to deal with the judges and cross the T's and dot the I's and all the other stuff, which is, there's certainly some truth to that. I just don't know at what point this becomes wishful thinking and copium. We don't have a lot of time left. Now, if we do okay in the midterms, if we just hold the position in the midterms, then we have another 2 years. But I wouldn't count on it. I would be. The first 2 or 3 months of the Trump administration were absolutely astonishing. Every day was something new, and now I worry that this momentum is falling off. And if you lose the midterms, then that's the end of your ability to just do these things. And if you lose the presidency in 28, which I think is unlikely, but it's a long time, then everything that was done can be undone. So we'll see. We'll see. But that's the last of the questions, and it's 8:30, so it's not a bad run. Okay, so that'll do it for tonight. I'll have some fun stuff to talk about. Did a lot of work, a lot of scientific foundation laying for the colonies. I'll just give you this real quick. I've been working with ChatGPT on this a lot. I'll just give you this as a teaser for Monday's show. I said to ChatGPT that I was going to need its help because science fiction has been so intertwined with relativistic terms for a century now. When the original Star Trek came out in 1966, it was revolutionary because it was the first science fiction to use relativity and relativistic language casually in conversation. And that gave it such an air of reality. What kind of things am I talking about? Well, the space warp factor. That's what it was called in the cage. Space warp factor 2. Time warps, phasers, but all the stuff that was colored in later. Wormholes. Every science fiction franchise, every science fiction episode or movie or TV that you've ever seen, ever, uses 20th century physics, early 20th century physics, relativistic physics, which says that faster than light speed is impossible, and so on and so on and so on. And I said to ChatGPT, we've got to throw all this stuff out, and I can do this on a macro layer, but the language is and the terminology is so pervasive that we got to just chuck it. I want the colonies to sound like 21st century science, and so it's going to. For example, we talked about this idea of these Stargate groups. Well, Stargate is a 20th century relativistic term where you're bending space-time. But I've been getting a lot into the science of this, and this travel is not going to bend space-time. It takes enormous amounts of energy to bend space-time. It's astonishing how much energy it takes to bend space-time, to create a wormhole, or to create a warp in space-time and move that warp. It's the output of thousands of suns, right? It's an incredible amount of energy to bend space-time and to make these wormholes and these warp drives. And when you get into the quantum level of understanding, now you're talking about qubits, and you're talking about probability fingerprint, and you're talking about decoherence, and you're talking about you're not talking about stargates, you're talking about probability stations. You're talking about the range is not limited by how far you can bend space or tunnel through space-time. Your range is limited by how far can you go across so-called distance and still cohere two diaphragms of ionized hydrogen, and still cohere those qubits so that the universe thinks that that location is the same. We're not traveling. We're going to create a diaphragm here of entangled particles and a diaphragm over there of entangled particles, and we're going to hit these things with lasers on the atomic level, and we're going to get these qubits in alignment so that for 5/1000ths of a second, these two ionized layers inside these magnetic fields have no way of knowing that they're in different locations, because as far as they're concerned, they're sharing the same quantum states, and so they think they're in the same place. And that's all you have to do. And so I was copying some terms. And so the range isn't like how far can I bend space. The range of a gate would be the region of informational space within which that station can force another region to share a matching probability fingerprint. Ooh. An engineer could say, our station has a coherence radius of about 0.4 light years in this sector. Here's some terms that help develop out. I said, so the range, they're probability gates. Yes, it's probability. So the range of these gates is determined by error correction. How far can we move from location A to location B and correct out the errors that the universe wants to impose by them having somewhat different quantum fingerprints? So now here are some of the terms that you get. Instead of you getting like warp factor 3 or the wormhole is open, you get coherence load, you get divergence margin, you get lock stability, informational terrain, horizon creep, threshold collapse. And when you're talking about the travel and whether the travel is safe, you can talk about the risk gradient profile, the safe divergence envelope, the delta risk curve, the gradient limit operations, frontier gradient index, gradient pressure, gradient creep, gradient burst, gradient induced decoherence. Sol Station has a shallow gradient. It's easiest in the network. Tau Ceti is stable, but the gradient spikes on the far side. That's why the Chinese arm swings north. Frontier Station 9 sits right on the gradient wall. Every captain knows it. Beta 61 was built past the gradient knee, and it still scares me. And it just sounds so fresh, because it is. It's fresh because it is. So there you go. We'll be doing this in more detail on Monday night. But for now, I'd like to just thank our members who make all this possible. As always, thank you so much for your support over the years. Thank you, Eden, Mr. John Eden, East of Eden. Thank you for your constantly heroic generosity, which we deeply appreciate. And so thank you all for being here. And we'll have a fun night on Monday night. And I am going full tilt boogie on this thing, and I mean to do it. So there you go. All right, thanks for joining us, and we will see you guys on Monday for your very own Stratosphere Studio.